They go both to Palestine and to Israel. That was the core difference. But even here, Abbas understood that they were not all going to be going back to Israel. And that was one of the reasons for this Palestinian state. So I would say of the five, those were the two where we had a kind of a conceptual breakthrough. But of course, it's not enough to have a conceptual breakthrough. You need to do it on the maps. And Jerusalem was going to be always a third rail of politics on that one, given the emotional sensitivities. And also the issue of security was also extremely sensitive. So in my view, these were three noble efforts to solve this conflict. Is it worth trying a fourth time now? I tend to agree with Ghaith about the leaders are not able to do the home run. There has been some positive developments as far as I'm concerned, where Sunni leaders are now understanding trying to get involved more. We just had a visit of Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, to the White House. Will that change the dynamic to get a breakthrough on these five core issues? It's unclear. But I don't see the makings of a 5-for-5 deal right now. I just don't think the leaders are capable of it. But I would urge you not to give up. Because, first of all, I think we could hit some singles. We could go in the direction, even if we don't hit the same destination right now. We need the publics. Ghaith made an important point about kind of the mirror imaging that's going on. That if you ask both sides, do you want two-state solution? You'll get either bare majorities or sometimes just underneath the majority of plurality. But you then ask the second question, does the other side want it? Oh, hell no, they don't want it. So the problem is that at a certain point you lose the publics. And part of our going around the campuses, Ghaith and myself, is to try to get people not to give up. Because I'm worried about the millennial generation. I'm worried that this is a generation that has no memory. They don't know what happened in the 90s. Ghaith and I were around. I was at the Madrid Peace Conference, which was a historic thing for the first time, Arabs and Israelis sitting together around one table. Historic. I was at Oslo in 1993 with the handshake of Bill Clinton with Rabin and Arafat. I wrote a book about that, Road to Oslo, which was used for a play that won the best Broadway play award on the subject of Oslo. But I worried people don't remember the Jordan-Israel Peace Treaty. Most of you weren't around in 91, 93, 94. And any of you who were around, I think you don't have great memories of that time, to put it mildly. So in this roller coaster, you guys have only seen downs. You haven't seen any ups in the roller coaster. We've seen both. And that's why we feel a certain moral obligation to go to visit and to tell people that we've seen how far it has come. We remember Golda Meir saying there's no such thing as Palestinian people. We remember Arafat and the terrorism and everything like that. We remember all this. So the fact that now they're dealing with each other, even though it's a bit acrimonious at this minute, doesn't mean we believe, oh, let's just blow it all up and start all over again. No. Yes, Ghaith is right. The parties have learned the hard way. And now we're at this junction. Now we can give up. But when we give up, it just means the people at the radical edges will prevail. And I don't think that's going to lead us anywhere. It's just going to be greater polarization and greater violence. So what for me is a single? What would be something that would get us in the direction, even if we don't solve it all at once? We don't hit the ball over the fence. Whenever you try to hit the ball over the fence, the odds of strikeout are much greater. Ghaith isn't a baseball fan, but I think he knows that point. Yeah, he's learned right now. We've been doing this together. So what's a single? I think you got to appeal to the guts of each side. You got to tell each side, okay, what do you really care about at the core? At the core, what you care about if you're a Palestinian is you don't want to see a creeping annexation of the West Bank. You want to say that the land is still something to talk about. Okay, maybe we can't solve the problem now, but we could leave the door open to other leaders who have that political will to solve it. That's a good thing. Now, I mean, the Palestinian polling, in my view, is off the charts wrong when they say 58%, in their sense, 58% of Israelis want to expel all the Palestinians from the West Bank. I think the number is probably more like 2%. But whatever it is, that's their perception of the Palestinian side. And the perceptions matter in this conflict. So what do you do about it? How do you deal with the gut fears? The gut fears on the Palestinian side would be to say is, okay, there's this construction beyond the security barrier. Those of you who've been to the West Bank, maybe you've seen it. Israelis call it a fence, Palestinians call it a wall. We use a more neutral term, security barrier. And it has had a big impact in reducing terror, there's no doubt. But the point is that it's also kind of out of sight, out of mind, out of sight. Well, okay, we don't see the Palestinians as Israelis, the Palestinians, we don't see Israelis anymore. So it creates two separate societies. But what you have, and I've been doing, I just did this website, which I'd urge you to Google, called Settlements and Solutions, which is to try to do a deep dive on 139 different settlements. Each one, how they voted in the last 3 elections, over 400 pie charts. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but what you have is a large majority of the settlers, 85% of those Israelis living over the Green Line live within 8% of the West Bank, and including East Jerusalem. Israel doesn't call those in East Jerusalem settlers, but that's why I use a more neutral term, Israelis over the Green Line, because they'll call West Bank settlers, but they won't call East Jerusalem neighborhood. But 85% live in 8% of the land. And the remaining 15% live scattered all over the 92% of the West Bank. The idea of a land swap emerged, and I've done this work on that, is to say, okay, if Israel keeps 8%, it gives 5 to 8% somewhere else. And that's a principle the Palestinians have accepted, this idea of land swaps. Where the exact land is, I don't want to make it sound like that is all accepted, but I think it would be something for Israelis to say, here, this 92% over the West Bank, where the 15% of Israelis live, about 97,000, don't add any more people, okay? That would be a sign to the Palestinian gut that you're not out to creepingly annex or take over the land. That would be really important. Many people don't know. All they know, it's a bumper sticker. Settlements are bad. And I'm not here pro-settlements, anti-settlements. My point is to say, let's differentiate where these settlers are. Could they be part of a solution? Even under the Abbas map, some of the settlements will be Israeli, under Abbas, under the Palestinian side. So let's be creative about it. Let's appeal to the Palestinian gut fears. What is the Israeli gut fears? The Israeli gut fears are you're not educating your kids for peace. You're not educating for coexistence. There's, summer camps have been named after certain killers, and things like that, or town squares. Or you'll see, what about that relatives of suicide bombers or people who perpetrate violence? The longer you serve in an Israeli jail, the higher the stipend your family gets. Now that sends a perverse message to Israelis that says, if you kill more, you get more money. It's paid to slay. And that is a perverse message that is a killer in terms of getting people on the Israeli side to believe Palestinians are partners. So here what you could do is to say, and now you have this Taylor Force Act, to say you got to cut off this incentive system that the longer you are in Israeli jails, meaning the greater the violence, the more money you get. No one wants anybody to go homeless. If God forbid, somebody to go to a jail, they should get whatever welfare is needed to perpetuate themselves and their kids. But there shouldn't be an incentive system with tables saying, here, you get more money if you kill more. That kills any sense of partnership. So if you say to me, David, what's a single here? What's the gut on both sides? Appeal to people's guts. Then they'll take you seriously. If we're just talking on all, we're gonna lose these people. We're gonna lose a younger generation. Ghaith and I know it very well. And so it's very important, I think, if we can't hit the home run, hit a single. Do one thing that's politically hard for you. And that would be, I think, significant. The last point I want to make, and I'm trying to be brief, is just what does that leave us? I think to get to the same theme of how do we broaden the coalition is not how do we rip apart communities, how do we create wider coalitions? That should be the goal, because there's too much dehumanizing here in this conflict. There's no trust. And the way to build trust is to humanize each side more. And that means, in my view, practical coexistence. It means looking for those pathways. Maybe it's to be counselors in the Seeds of Peace summer camps that get Israeli and Palestinian kids together. Maybe it's to work for the Paris Center for Peace that does a lot of these people-to-people things. Or, building kindergartens, for both communities, doing an alternative spring break. I mean, I think there's ways to be creative here. But what I don't think would be creative here would be, in my view, and I'm sure there'll be disagreement here, I'm concerned about the BDS movement, because I feel that it is importing the politics of division of the Mideast, when we should be exporting the politics of inclusion, the politics of political pluralism. That means it shouldn't be a crime to sit with Jewish students together with Arab students at lunch counters here, at different groups, working on projects together. Or, if you can't say the word two-state solution, it's hard to get the other guy to believe you're serious. These are two problems that I have found going around the country on BDS that I've encountered. We'll say end the occupation, but won't say the word two states. Or we'll say we can't sit with Jewish groups. And that's just not American, in my view. We've got to find ways not to rip our campus communities apart. We got to find ways to broaden the coalition. Find me the cause that will get Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans on the same team, to broaden it. This is what we want to kind of replicate for the people over there. That means finding commonalities. Don't each one feel that they're being marginalized. I've always been part of social justice movements, and now I'm told that I'm not really a part of it. Look for ways to broaden the coalition. I look to practical coexistence as opposed to BDS as ways that let's come up with joint projects that could have an impact over there. I think it's possible. You're not governments, we're not in government anymore. But I think we need to find ways that build bridges between peoples. That's the core of this. Because we got to get these numbers from only 50% one to two-state solution to going much higher. That's something we could do. And the only way to do that is that each side is convinced the other one's a partner. If they're not convinced there's a sense of partnership, those numbers are going to just nosedive, and we're not going to have a chance for the future as well. So that would be my message. Avoid all or nothing with the leadership we've got right now, and look for the singles that are more politically doable, and then create the human coalitions on both sides that would really persuade the other side that there really is a sense of partnership, and therefore truly a chance for two states. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. We'll now have a time for questions. So we'll be coming around. Jen, if you want to start collecting the note cards, and then we'll be asking those questions up here. so I'll just present the questions up here so everyone can hear, and then you guys can answer them how you want. So first, what are some examples of singles?
Well, like I said, the singles in my view are each side taking at least one hard step for them politically, but that would have resonance, but that would have resonance for the other side. So a resonance for me would be if Israel didn't build beyond the barrier, it would send a message that 92% of the West Bank is something that Israel clearly wants to negotiate, and that it's willing to discuss land swaps, land exchanges. But it would at least say to people, okay, you only have, it's still possible to do 2 states because 85% live in only 8% of the land. It would send a message that you're not going to build beyond that because you want to keep that option open. And like I said, on the Palestinian side, the way to appeal to the gut of the Israelis would be is to say you're not going to give incentive payments to families of people who perpetuate violence. That would be a way of saying, there's no winking and nodding here. You can't say I'm for peace, but yet I'm going to pay people who blow people up. So I think both of those, each one appeals to the gut fears of each side. And to me, it would be a chance of getting people from the bleachers onto the playing field and getting people to believe something is really moving here.
Maybe I'm a little bit less ambitious than David because maybe I have less faith in the leaders of both sides. So my ideas are even more simple than this. For example, you look at the West Bank, some of these cities, what we call Area A, the areas where the Palestinian Authority has full civil and security control, have become extremely congested. People, population growth, etc. And the idea, very simple idea, of allowing the Palestinians building and zoning, planning and zoning authorities just around these areas in ways that do not threaten Israeli security, because most of them are far from Israeli communities and settlements, etc. This will go a long way both in showing the Palestinians that their lives is improving, but also showing that there is a gradual, slow but gradual deoccupation. And from the Israeli side, I think one of the issues that concern Israelis most is the idea that Palestinians do not recognize the Jewish connection to the land. Now, I'm not going to say the Palestinians should say that Israel is a Jewish state, because this is a negotiation issue. Yet, I think it's very important for Palestinian leaders to go out and say, we recognize that the Jewish people have an attachment to this land. We understand, and by the way, Abbas himself, both privately and a couple of times publicly, would refer to Quranic verses that talk about Bani Israel, the Jewish people, and their place in the history of the region. I think a discourse from the Palestinian side that shows the Israelis that we do not consider you as a foreign existence and a foreign presence, but rather as a people who have a legitimate claim in the same way that we have a legitimate claim. I think these things of this sort will go a long way towards rebuilding trust between the peoples and will create a kind of circumstances that will allow us to tackle more policy-oriented questions.
What are the Palestinian people's as well as the government's thoughts on BDS of Israel?
The Palestinian people. I can speak about the Palestinians in the West Bank in particular and in Gaza, though Gaza is a slightly different case. Let me start with the government. The government position is the following, consistent with the two-state solution, i.e. recognizing the state of Israel and aspiring to a state of Palestine. The Palestinian government position is we do not support boycotts of Israel, because Israel is a legitimate state. We they support rather, the boycott of settlements and aspects of Israeli behavior that are related to the occupation. Settlements, things of this sort that happen in the West Bank. So this is the official Palestinian position. In terms of the public, it's actually quite interesting. The majority, if you look at polls, will tell you they support BDS. Yet the majority, if you look in reality, do not engage in BDS. One of my first, I have to admit, I was one of the first BDSers before BDS was very popular. That was back in '97 when I moved to Ramallah, and I vowed to myself I'll never buy Israeli. I would go to a shop and say, I don't want the Israeli yogurt, give me the Palestinian yogurt. And the shopkeeper would laugh at me. Are you serious? There is a sense among Palestinians, many of whom still engage with Israelis on a daily basis, that Israel might be the occupier, you might like Israel, but Israelis, they're good, they're bad, there are some indifferent, and therefore while in principle, in theory, they would say, yes, we support it. In reality, what you see is that there is no traction for BDS, whether in terms of practice or frankly in terms of political mobilization that we see in the West Bank and in Gaza.
What role do both of you believe universities can play besides BDS?
I repeat, I think the idea is to look creatively for coalitions and organizational work that you can engage in practical coexistence. Like, I mentioned the idea of like alternative spring break. I was at Northwestern and they said, oh, we're going to Honduras to work on the water supply or something. What about if you got Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans, non-hyphenated Americans to go together and say, here, you know what, we just want to go over there and we want to engage in things to bring them together. Maybe we're going to help run sports groups. We're going to, we're going to do summer camps, like the Seeds of Peace in the summer. We're going to work with the Paris Center that's done tens of thousands of people-to-people kinds of activities. In other words, look for the commonality here on your campus that will bring broader support and will convince people that there is a sense of partnership. To demonize the other one, it seems to me, is you're going to rip your own community apart here at Case Western, and you're going to convince the other one you can't be a partner if you want to demonize me and compare me to South Africa in the early 1980s. This to me it's common sense, and I've looked at polling data on American college students too, and people also understand that. They go, I'm not looking for anything that is going to rip my community apart. And if I was a student senator or something, a student government person, I wouldn't want that. That's not the climate I'd want to foster. I'd want to say is, how do I go from like 1 + 1 = 5 as opposed to 1 + 1 = 1? What's going to be the multiplier here that gets more people to be adherents of a cause? And that to me is more the practical coexistence work. If you write me, I'll give you a list of about 15 of these groups that do people-to-people kind of work. The practical coexistence to build these coalitions, to get these numbers up, both in Israel and in the West Bank, to create a sense of partnership. I think that's critical.
Fully agree, but I think there's more that can be done in addition to this. And that is really engaging in dialogue, often difficult dialogue, by the way, to understand what are the perceptions, the concerns, the interests, and the grievances that the other side has. It's very easy if you talk within your own group to have an echo chamber, to basically dismiss the interests of the other side. That's what I did before I engaged in negotiations. And you need to engage with real life. Palestinians, Israelis, pro-Palestinians, pro-Israelis, depending where you stand, to understand at least, even if you don't agree with where they're coming from, to understand where they're coming from. At the end of the day, if you want to move forward, at least you need to acknowledge that the other side has legitimate concerns, has legitimate interests, and this can only happen in dialogue. I was shocked, and the whole collaborative process that we have, the roadshow that we take to campuses, actually happened in 2009 when we were both in Santa Barbara, I believe, where after a lunch with a bunch of pro-Palestine and pro-Israel students, one of them comes up to us and says, wow, I've never met the other side. And how can you start moving forward if you do not get a sense from the other side of what they stand for, what are their interests, and what they want from you? If you don't start with this, I believe that there is no space for conversation. So in addition to practical things, I do believe conversations, including difficult conversations, but respectful conversations, are necessary to understand at least the basics that both have some legitimate points to make, and we need to work through these points.
I can just add one more thing. It's something Ghaith and I have done together for every year in the University of California university system. There we did a Yale last spring, and we called it mock negotiations, where we got Jewish Americans pretending to be Palestinian negotiators, and they were on Raith's team. I got Muslim Americans on the Israeli team, and what we have found amazing all the time is people saying, wow, we didn't know it was this difficult. We never looked at a map before. We just thought of this conflict as a bumper sticker. And when you have to start dealing with maps and trying to solve issues, then you see the complexity. So what Ghaith and I are really devoted to is a kind of a solutions discourse, not a finger-pointing discourse. And our belief that if people actually have to look to solutions, they really do have to take each other's needs into account, and they realize the complexity. But I got this all the time, and I'm sure, you know, Ghaith got it in his group on the Jewish side. I would get a lot on the Muslim side where people come and say, look, I just thought this conflict is about justice, and I just thought I'm for it, but I didn't know how complicated it is. I've never looked at these maps. I don't know how the solution will go, you know, because no one has ever taught me this, and this is complicated. This is like playing 6-dimensional chess. Yeah, hello, you know, good morning. Yes, that's what it is. But you need to delve into that complexity. You shouldn't be afraid of it. And that's why I think Ghaith's got a good point about the dialogue, you know, to understand what the concerns are. That has been our experience in doing this creative mock negotiations exercise. That people just come out away saying, wow, this is complicated. But not in a way that they should be paralyzed by the complexity, but in a way that they learn from it, and I think makes them more determined to create these sense of partnerships.
Ghaith, you discussed the best strategy of working toward peace in the West Bank in the current situation is considering between populations and cooperation. Does the BDS movement work toward this positive goal? I'm sorry, understanding between populations and cooperation.
You know, BDS. I mean, first of all, let me start with maybe a controversial statement. I understand why many people join BDS. I understand the sense of anger, the sense of injustice, the sense of futility, the sense that this is going nowhere. I understand that people are fed up with the attempts that David described of going for diplomacy and getting nothing out of there. So I understand that there is a lot of anger and a sense of grievance. However, I do not believe that BDS is the way to go on two levels, on a conceptual level and an organizational level. On a conceptual level, I'm simply someone who believes that the only way, the best way to move forward is through dialogue and engagement. I believe when you deny the other, when you stand in front of someone and say to them, you are not legitimate, your beliefs are not legitimate, you are fundamentally have no right to your beliefs, what do you expect? This other person is going to dig deep, and this other person is going to be defensive, and there is no space for a conversation here, and there's no space to move forward here. So, as an approach, that is my view. Personally, this is a value judgment. As an organization, I also have issues with BDS. Now, one can find the logic in calling for BDS as a way of ending the occupation and creating a two-state solution, a logic that I do not agree with, but there might be a logic here. One of the problems that I found with the BDS movement is, frankly, they never came out to say what their objective is, and most of their leaders at least, are ones who do not believe in a two-state solution. And frankly use BDS not as a way of ending the occupation, but as a way of ending Israel, and in my view, this is utterly and completely unacceptable at any level. Moreover, while I do sympathize with a lot of the participants in the BDS movement, I do also believe that BDS movement contains within it and allows within it some elements which simply should not be allowed in any organization, some anti-Semitic elements, etc. And until these are purged, it's very hard to deal with the BDS as an organization. So, both conceptually and organizationally, I have issues with the BDS movement. I don't think it moves us in that direction. At the end of the day, I believe strongly, as I said, in dialogue as a way moving forward, and any movement that does not foster dialogue, that actually is against dialogue, that penalizes people who want to engage in dialogue through the anti-normalization, is one that I feel is not doing the people on the ground any good.
David, BDS advocates Israeli boycott, not Jewish. Why do you conflate the two? What does Israel want anyway?
Okay. I never said it was going to boycott Jewish goods, but I have found with the SJP groups that we have met with across the country, and I don't know what the situation here is, I don't think you have SJP, but in some of these places, Students for Justice groups, and I've gotten Arab American students that come up to me privately who said, we're not allowed to sit with Hillel. We can meet with individuals, but we can't sit with Hillel. We can't say the word two states. How do we expect Israel to say the word Palestine if we can't say the word Israel? So I do think that this is what I call importing the politics of division when we need to export the hallmark of tolerism and pluralism